Over the past 25 years, the NBA hasn't just changed, it's been completely reshaped. And at the center of it all is something we now call the player empowerment era. For decades, NBA teams controlled everything. If you were drafted, that was your city. That was your future. Players were incredibly talented, incredibly valuable, but they didn't have much say in where they lived or how their careers unfolded. Then, that started to change. Player empowerment was originally a good thing. It was about balance. It was about giving athletes control over their own careers. Instead of being locked into situations they didn't choose, players could prioritize winning, maximize their value, and even use their platforms to speak out on social and political issues. And for a while, it felt like progress. Watching players take power back from billionaires, that was revolutionary. But over time, something shifted. As salaries exploded and media deals skyrocketed, the power didn't spread evenly across the league. It concentrated at the very top. A small group of superstars gained enormous leverage, enough to influence roster decisions, coaching hires, and even front office strategy. That's when we entered the era of the super team. Stars began teaming up in major markets. Long-term contracts stopped meaning long-term commitment. Players would sign massive extensions, then request trades months later. Load management became common, with stars sitting out nationally televised games to preserve their bodies. From my perspective, empowerment started to look less like fairness and more like chaos. Franchises struggled to build continuity. Smaller markets felt like farm systems for bigger ones. The NBA's middle class, solid, non-superstar players began getting squeezed financially as teams saved cap space for elite talent. Something had to give. Please take a moment to like and subscribe and enjoy the rest of the video. Thanks. In 2023, the league and the players union agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement, and it was a big one. The most controversial piece, the second apron, a financial penalty system designed to make building super teams extremely difficult. In other words, the NBA pushed back. The goal was simple: restore balance, protect parity, and make contracts mean something again. But here's the real question: did player empowerment go too far? Or is this just the natural evolution of modern sports business? Because what started as a fight for fairness has turned into one of the most dramatic power shifts in professional sports history, and the league may never look the same again. If you really want to understand why the player empowerment era blew up the way it did, you have to look at what the league used to be. Because for most of NBA history, players didn't have power, teams did. For decades, there was no real free agency. If a team drafted you, that was basically your basketball home unless the front office decided to trade you. Not you, them. Your career path, your city, even where your family lived, all of it was controlled by ownership. Real change didn't show up until 1988. That's when the NBA finally adjusted its unrestricted free agency rules. But even then, it wasn't exactly freedom. A player had to finish 2 contracts and/or play 7 years in the league before he could truly choose where to go. That's a long time. The first guy to actually hit those requirements, Tom Chambers. He left the Seattle Supersonics for the Phoenix Suns, and at the time, it was a big deal. It felt new, almost radical. But even today, the system still leans heavily toward team control. The draft locks top prospects into one franchise right away. They don't get to negotiate with other teams. First-round picks are tied to their original team for years, and if they won out early, they'd have to take a massive financial hit. Realistically, a star player can be tied to one organization for 8 seasons before they truly control their own destiny. 8 years. Now layer in the money. Back in 2005, players were taking home about 57% of league revenue. Through later negotiations, that number dropped to an even 50-50 split between players and owners. Meanwhile, franchise values exploded. Teams became billion-dollar assets. Owners got richer. The league kept growing. So you had players generating the product, watching valuations skyrocket while fighting to protect their share. That tension was building for years. Then, social media showed up, and that changed everything. Platforms like Twitter gave players something they never had before: a direct line to fans. No reporters filtering their words, no team PR department shaping the message, just them. In 2009, Charlie Villanueva tweeted during halftime of a game against the Boston Celtics. It was so unusual at the time that the Associated Press literally had to explain to readers what a tweet was. Think about that. Players were suddenly building personal brands that were just as powerful, sometimes more powerful, than the teams they played for. And once athletes realized they didn't need the traditional gatekeepers anymore, that's when the groundwork for the player empowerment era was really set. The power shift didn't happen overnight, but the fuse was officially lit. Here's something people forget about the player empowerment era. The first modern super team wasn't built by players, it was built by a front office. Back in the summer of 2007, the Boston Celtics changed everything, and they probably didn't even realize what they were starting. At the time, Boston was stuck. They had Paul Pierce, a legitimate superstar still in his prime, but the team around him wasn't good enough. The 2006 season was brutal. Pierce put up big numbers, but the Celtics finished 24-58. There was even an 18-game losing streak. It felt hopeless. Danny Ainge, running basketball operations, had tried to rebuild through young talent, but it wasn't moving fast enough, and Pierce wasn't getting any younger. So Ainge made a decision. Forget the slow rebuild. Go all in. First, he traded for Ray Allen from Seattle. Then, just weeks later, he pulled off the real bombshell, trading for former MVP Kevin Garnett from Minnesota. And just like that, the league shifted. The trade that shocked the league. The Garnett trade was controversial from day one. Minnesota, led by executive Kevin McHale, who just so happened to be a former Celtics teammate of Ainge, accepted a package centered around Al Jefferson and role players. Boston also managed to keep key young pieces like Rondo. Was that really enough for a generational talent like Garnett? The 2007 Celtics won 66 games. They won the championship, and the Big Three became the blueprint. Here's the part that matters. Players across the NBA were watching. They saw how quickly Boston went from mediocre to champion just by stacking proven stars. No 5-year rebuild, no trust the process, just elite talent immediately combined, and that's when something clicked. If executives could pull strings, leverage relationships, and aggressively combine superstars to save their jobs, why couldn't the players do the same thing for their own careers? The Celtics didn't mean to start the player empowerment era, but they proved something powerful. The fastest way to win isn't patience, it's consolidation. And once the stars realized that, the balance of power in the NBA was never going to be the same. 3 years after Boston showed how powerful a super team could be, the players took the blueprint and flipped it. July 8th, 2010. That's the night everything changed. The night the league tilted. On a live ESPN special called The Decision, nearly 10 million people tuned in to watch LeBron James announce where he'd play next. In the middle of that broadcast, he said the line that still echoes through NBA history.
And this fall, man, it's very tough. And this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
With that sentence, LeBron left the Cleveland Cavaliers and joined Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh on the Miami Heat. And this wasn't Boston 2.0. The Celtics' Big Three had been built by executives. Miami was different. This time, the players coordinated it themselves. If you look at Cleveland's roster at the time, then you realize LeBron realized that he isn't capable of carrying a team without another superstar. So waiting on a front office to magically land 2 All-NBA players was unrealistic. So instead of waiting, he took the coward way out and acted. The fallout was brutal. The backlash was immediate and loud. Fans burned jerseys. Media personalities tore him apart. Even league leadership was reportedly uncomfortable with how much power one player had just displayed on national television. But underneath the drama, something bigger had happened. LeBron had just shown that a single superstar could control the narrative without relying on reporters, command primetime TV space, coordinate contracts with other stars, and completely reshape the competitive balance of the league. That had never happened before. After Miami, LeBron didn't just win, he expanded his influence. The Heat went to 4 straight finals and won 2 championships. The strategy worked, and off the court, LeBron built media companies, spoke out on social and racial justice issues, and became one of the most powerful athlete voices in the world. The message to the rest of the league was clear. If your organization can't build a contender, you don't have to stay. That was new. Before 2007, players mostly waited. In 2007, executives built super teams. In 2010, the players took control. And after that, contracts started feeling more flexible. Stars began aligning free agency windows. Trade requests became public leverage plays. The Miami experiment proved something undeniable. Superstars weren't just employees anymore. They were decision makers. And once that shift happened, the NBA's power structure was never going back to what it was. As player empowerment started gaining momentum, it didn't survive on vibes alone. It needed infrastructure, and that's where agents stepped in. Not the old school contract negotiators, but a new kind of power broker, the rise of Clutch. In 2012, Rich Paul founded Clutch Sports Group, and the agent game changed overnight. Traditionally, agents handled contracts, numbers, legal stuff, paperwork. Rich Paul turned it into something way bigger. Clutch wasn't just negotiating deals, it was shaping careers, managing brands, applying pressure behind the scenes, advising players when to sign, when to wait, and sometimes when to push for the exit. It was player empowerment with a strategy department. The agency grew fast. By 2019, Clutch expanded beyond basketball. The NFL, the WNBA, NIL deals, even global soccer representation. Rich Paul became so influential that when the NCAA tried to pass a rule that would have blocked agents without college degrees, quickly nicknamed the Rich Paul rule, public pressure forced a reversal. That's real leverage. But here's the part people don't always say out loud. Even Rich Paul has admitted this isn't player empowerment, it's star empowerment. Out of roughly 450 NBA players, maybe 8 to 10 have enough pull to truly bend a franchise. That's it. At its best, empowerment meant choosing your city in free agency, getting paid fairly, having a voice. But then something shifted. Players stopped waiting for free agency. Instead of honoring contracts and walking when they expired, stars began signing massive extensions and then asking out months later. The Supermax deal was designed to keep stars in small markets, offer them more money than anyone else could. In reality, some players signed it, secured the bag, and then demanded a trade anyway. Between 2017 and 2022, 9 all-star level players forced trades while still under contract. Guys like James Harden and Paul George did it more than once. Contracts started feeling optional, and that's when ownership got nervous. If you want the ultimate example of empowerment gone sideways, look at the Brooklyn Nets experiment. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving chose Brooklyn. The team later traded a mountain of draft picks for Harden after he forced his way out of Houston. On paper, historic offensive firepower. In reality, the trio played just 16 games together. Injuries, vaccine drama, trade demands. Harden eventually won it out. Then Durant did too. Brooklyn was left with no stars and barely any draft capital. It was the clearest sign yet that giving players total control without structure can implode a franchise. The small market problem. Then there's the New Orleans Pelicans. They drafted Anthony Davis, tried to build around him, made moves to compete, didn't matter. Through his agent, Rich Paul, Davis made it clear he wanted out, specifically to the Los Angeles Lakers. For New Orleans, it felt like an extinction-level event. For Davis, he won a championship almost immediately. That's the cold reality of star leverage. Meanwhile, the middle class got squeezed. Here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. When 1 or 2 players are making $50 million a year and the salary cap is fixed, the money has to come from somewhere. It comes from the middle. Solid starters, elite role players, the backbone of the league. Mid-level contracts started disappearing. Teams filled out rosters with minimum deals because so much cap space was tied up in superstars. And when a star demanded a trade, it wasn't the star whose life got uprooted. It was the role players used as salary matching. Empowerment at the top often meant instability for everyone else. Fans started feeling it too. By 2023, the NBA had seen enough. Commissioner Adam Silver and the owners pushed through a new collective bargaining agreement that introduced something called the second apron. It's basically a financial tripwire. Spend too much, you lose flexibility. You can't combine contracts and trades. You lose access to certain exceptions. Your future draft picks get frozen or even pushed to the back of the first round. In simple terms, building a 3-max super team is now brutally difficult. And if a superstar demands a trade, there are fewer and fewer teams that can even make the math work. The pendulum has swung back. So, what's the legacy? Player empowerment started as a necessary correction. Players deserve more control, more money, more voice, and they got it. But unchecked leverage turned into something else. Contracts became suggestions. Small markets felt disposable. The middle class got squeezed. Fans felt disconnected. So the league responded the only way it knew how, by writing rules that forced parity. The super team era as we knew it, it's basically over. And now we're in a new phase, one where stars are still powerful, but the system is designed to make sure they can never fully take over again. The revolution changed the NBA forever, but like most revolutions, it eventually met resistance. Like, subscribe, share, and maybe even hype the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe that the second apron can put a stop to the player empowerment era and the super teams? Thanks for watching.